really difficult challenge for many people, including students and us as educators. And so I think that maybe spending another Friday night, another hour online on a Friday evening isn't our best idea of a Friday evening, especially as we're very close to the beginning of a new academic year. So I'm very grateful for you coming here tonight. And I hope that you can find some of this next 60 minutes worthwhile, or you can find something useful during the presentation. Now, I'm going to share my screen with you. And this evening, in addition to the slides that I'm going to show, we're going to have a working document, a working Google document. And I'm going to share that Google document with you in a few minutes. But basically with this Google document, I'm going to ask you to do some activities on the Google document and then come back in. So let me first share with you what the Google document looks like. Now this is I'm going to share with you the link to this long, long Google document. And I know that if I were to be in a meeting with my colleagues and someone gave me a packet of documents, I would immediately begin flipping through all the documents to see what it was about. And online, we have the same experience. When someone sends you a link to some kind of document or some kind of website, immediately we begin to scroll through it and see what it is. However, for tonight, I'd like you to be patient and just work with the first page of the document. And when I share this document with you, just look at the first page and then the second page of the document. And then we're gonna put you into breakout rooms, probably about 4 people in a room. And if you're in breakout room 1, click on breakout 1. If you're on breakout room 2, click on breakout room 2, and so on and so forth. Basically, what I'm gonna ask you to do, here are the instructions here, but they're also on your individual breakout room document. Greet each other, say hello or konbanwa or whatever. Use the language you feel comfortable with or whichever you want to use or practice tonight. This is not an English classroom. This is not an English test. So just use the language you feel comfortable with. If it's English, okay. If it's Japanese, that's okay. If it's French, whatever you want to do. So say hello to each other. And then very, 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 very quickly, introduce yourselves again in the language you want to use, English, Japanese, French, or whatever. Say your name, say maybe where you're from or where you live, and say 1 or 2 things that you enjoy doing and more. So please say 5 things if you can about yourselves. But please don't make it a presentation. Please don't make it a discussion. I want you to go very, very quickly, because on your individual breakout room document, I'd like you to add some kind of photo. It could be of you or of your house or of your car or something like that. And quickly, very quickly, write some introduction about yourself, So let's review. I'm going to share this document with you. You're going to go to your breakout room document. Maybe it's 1 or breakout 2 and so on and so forth. Greet each other. Quickly introduce yourselves, and then paste a photo maybe and write some information about yourself. Is everybody okay? So that's the first thing we're going to do tonight. And I'm going to share with you this document right now in the chat, which I've lost. Here we are. And Miguel is going to make, from now, Miguel is going to make 4 breakout rooms, 4 people per room. Please go to the room you're assigned, open your document, and we'll see you in 4 minutes. You've got 4 minutes to do the task. So please go very quickly. Miguel, can you make the breakout rooms?
Give me 1 second. Just give a minute for everyone to open the document first.
Okay. That's a good idea. I should take a breath.
check your check the Zoom chat. Is everybody okay? Everyone has the document open. This is your last chance.
There's about 20 people with the document open so far.
Okay, let's give it a go. If someone in your group doesn't have the document open, just give them a hand. But here we go. 4 minutes. Is that correct, JP?
4 minutes. Yeah, 4 minutes.
Okay, please enjoy.
Hey, because we're going to come back to this document. We're going to come back to this document later. So it's kind of an introduction to what we're going to do later. So please don't worry about that. So I'd like to just briefly introduce myself. So my name is Jean-Pierre, you heard. I'm from a very large family. That's me in the front in this photo. And my 5 brothers are behind me. I'm from the east side of Canada, Eastern Canada, in a town called St. John. And before I came to Japan, I did a bachelor's degree in history and political science. And then I did a second degree in pedagogy, in education. And so I trained to be a teacher before I came to Japan, to be a history teacher. But while I was training to be a history teacher, I was in Quebec City, and I began to work part-time as something similar to an ALT. I was a language monitor on a Canadian federal government program to support second language learning for English speakers to learn French and for French speakers to learn English. So I was working as a language monitor or an ALT with English. And so that's where I began to first teach English. And then in 1996, I came to Japan on the JET program, and I thought I might stay for 2 years in Japan. But I've been here for 25 now. And about the year 2000, I started a master's degree. And honestly, when I began the master's, it was for very instrumental purposes only. My goal was to get the certificate to improve my employability. I wasn't thinking about much beyond that. But unfortunately, I didn't have clear goals. I wasn't very well organized. I didn't have good, successful strategies, even at the master's level. And so most students at Temple University will finish their master's in maybe 2 or 3 years. But it took me 5 years to finish that. And then in 2008, I began a doctorate. And once again, I actually began with instrumental reasons, but the more I did my coursework and the more I became focused on what I was interested in learning, my motivations changed, and they became very, very self-determined, almost intrinsic-like, but not quite intrinsic. There's no sparking joy with it, but and life has a way of running its own course, despite what we are planned. And my dissertation took 10 years to finish. So I finished that in 2018. That was also the year that I moved to Nagano, to the University of Nagano in Japan. And part of my doctoral dissertation was related to some of the themes we're going to talk about tonight. So my dissertation was quite long and complex with multiple questions, but 3 of the questions were related to effort or motivational intensity to learn English, also the stability of language learning goals, and the stability of achievement orientations. Okay, so I think I've talked enough about me. And so finally, we can talk about tonight's plan. And we're going to talk about theory or just kind of background definitions or descriptions about L2 learning motivation, and then achievement orientations, and maybe about 20 minutes of practice, some activities related to these things. So that's our plan for tonight. And then maybe Q&A at the end. Okay, so let's get started. And the first thing is, what is L2 learning motivation? How would you describe it? How would you define it? What does it refer to? What does it relate to? Take a minute and think about the question. What is it, or how do you define it, or how does it relate to other things? And type your answer in chat of how you describe L2 learning motivation. And maybe while you're doing that, you can think about this quote here from Dr. Martin Ford on motivating humans. So in the chat, take 1 minute and describe what is L2 motivation to you, or how do you describe it and define it? And then also think about this quote. So I'm going to put the timer on for 1 minute. Please write your ideas about L2 motivation in the chat. That's about a minute. I have to close my screen like that to see what you've written in the chat. Okay, lots of good ideas in the chat. Yeah, really good ideas. Here are some, sorry, I've got a computer problem. One moment. Here are some definitions or descriptions for motivations. Here's an early one from Gardner-Lambert from 1959. He said motivation is the impetus for the formulation of desires and efforts. Later, Gardner said that it's the extent to which one works or strives to learn a second language because of a desire to do so, as well as the satisfaction from experience learning the second language and achieving success in the second language. Another definition here, it's the dynamic arousal that initiates, directs, coordinates, amplifies, terminates, and evaluates the cognitive and motor processes whereby initial wishes and desires are selected, prioritized, and then acted upon. That's from Dornier and Otto in 98. Kim Knowles says it's the combination of intrinsic, extrinsic, and integrative reasons. A slightly more recent definition from Kim. Motivation is an L2 learner's realization of personal significance of an L2 related activity. Their motive, learners' motives, can be transformed into motivation when the motive integrates with goals and participation. Participation could be physical, real, or imaginary. And before I lose you all, here's a kind of clunky definition of motivation, but we might describe it as motivation, L2 learning motivation, as a series or collections of dynamic internal processes that provide strength for sustaining purposeful language learning behavior. So in short, it's why we choose to learn the L2, there's a mistake there, how long we persist at learning the second language, and how hard our efforts are when we do that. Now, we're going to look really briefly at a few educational, or sorry, L2 learning motivational models or theories, very briefly. The first one is the socio-educational model, which I'm sure maybe many of you all have heard before. The key word in the model is integrativeness. And for Gardner, second language learners in Canada are motivated to learn the second language, either English or French, because of positive feelings that they have towards the other culture. In other words, the learner wants to integrate into that L2 culture, or that L2 community. In the model, in Gardner's model, there's also the idea of instrumental motivation, which is the awareness of benefits that are accrued as a result of learning a second language. So for example, job promotion, for example. And for Gardner, these two ideas can run in parallel. Integrativeness and instrumental orientations can run in parallel. And in the Canadian context, this model was quite successful, and it found frequently that integrative motivations were stronger and more powerful than instrumental motivations. However, in other cultures outside of Canada, the model was less successful. And since the 1980s, there have been criticisms of the model. And one of the most important criticisms is that the model doesn't capture the necessity of English as a global language. So for example, the model can successfully explain why English speakers might learn French, or French speakers might learn English in Canada. But what about Hungarian speakers learning English? Or what about Japanese speakers learning English? So to what culture do these learners want to integrate? So if a Hungarian is learning English, to what English culture or community are they integrating into? So the model kind of begins to break down outside of Canada due to Canada's kind of unique bilingual, bicultural history. A second model, or a theory, which you may be familiar with here, this is self-determination theory from DC and Ryan. And this theory is not particularly designed for language learning, but it has been adapted and adopted by researchers in our field. The key words are intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic refers to motivations to learn. So for example, some kind of pleasure derived from understanding or learning something new, or achieving, so surpassing your previous achievements, or maybe there's some kind of stimulation that's experienced from learning the language. So the idea here is that language learning or a language learning activity, a particular type of activity, kind of sparks joy within the individual. The other part of the theory is extrinsic motivations. And these can be considered on a continuum of different types of extrinsic motivations based on how they're connected to how self-determined you are. More self-determined is more within you, that desire to learn the language would include integrated or identified regulations. And for these integrated or identified regulations, the learning goal is fully integrated within the individual, or the learning goal will aid in achieving another goal. And a good example for identified regulation might be a person who dreams to be an airline pilot. Airline pilots need to speak English. So someone whose dream it is to learn to be a pilot would then maybe happily or willingly need to learn English and achieve success in learning English. On the lower end of extrinsic motivations are introjected and external regulations. These are less self-determined. The first one, introjected, might be related to self-esteem. So for example, this desire to live up to the standards of others, maybe family or friends or the community. Or external regulation may be related to, for example, an entrance exam, so studying to pass the exam, or maybe meeting required credit limits. For example, students might need X number of credits to graduate, so they study for graduation, so on and so forth. And then the third idea, or the third theory, is the L2 self-system from Zoltan and Dornier. The keywords are ideal L2 self and the ought to L2 self. The former, the ideal self, this is an idealized, future-oriented individual with qualities that one desires to have. So in the future, my ideal self, my ideal image of me is someone who is fluent in a second language, for example, or can run a marathon, or whatever the self is. Here, of course, language learning. And according to Dornier, in 2009, the ideal L2 self relates approximately with, but not completely, with integrative and internalized motives. So integrative from Dornier, from Gardner, and then also internalized motives, self-determined motives. Ought to, an ought to self, in contrast with ideal, is the desire to learn the second language, maybe to meet the expectations of others, again, family, friends, community, and also to avoid negative consequences. So that was a very, very brief summary of 3 theories of L2 learning motivation. And probably you're familiar with many of the ideas within these. And so nothing is new here, kind of like a rehearsal, or sorry, a summary for you, a practice for you. But now I'm going to move on to achievement orientations. And achievement orientations have a very, very rich history in educational psychology. There are multiple definitions, multiple models, multiple scales for measuring them. But despite this rich history in educational psychology, there's been very, very little research in our field using achievement orientations. And 20 years ago, in a very important paper that Dr. Kate Udier published in the JALT journal in 2003, she pointed out that achievement orientations have basically not been studied in our field, and especially in the Japanese context as well. So it's kind of in contrast to our understanding and knowledge of L2 learning motivations, achievement orientations for most people is, in our field, is very, very minimal. But despite that, and maybe some of the way the theories is talked about might be new for many of you, and maybe a bit confusing, but a lot of the concepts behind the theory and also other theories that are related to it will seem, I think, should seem very familiar to you. So here's a very clunky definition of achievement orientations. They're cognitive representations of future-focused purposes that learners adopt in academic situations to direct behavior toward either approaching or avoiding of a competence-related end state. and that's a bit clunky. But in short, they refer to the way in which we interpret and react to, for example, learning tasks in the classroom. And the way we react to those tasks in the classroom will result in different patterns of behavior, different patterns of affect, and different patterns of cognition. So how we behave in the classroom, how we emote in the classroom, and how we think about these tasks will be different based on our own orientations. Okay, so I'm gonna have to speed it up a bit. So I mentioned this rich history. Tolman in 1926 actually began to describe individuals' achievement aims. That was sort of the beginning of this history of achievement orientations. And then Henry Murray in 1938, he saw mastery and performance as one factor of achievement motivation. He thought that they were combined as one. And Murray described achievement need. So the need for achievement is to accomplish something difficult, to master and attain a high standard, to excel oneself, to rival and surpass others. That's the definition from Murray. Murray, you may have heard of his name before. He led a series of psychologically damaging experiences on Harvard undergraduates in the late 1950s and 1960s. And one of them was Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, the famous Unabomber in the United States. So there are two predominant achievement orientations, mastery and performance. And multiple research teams have identified these two orientations, mastery and performance. And it's probable, similar to Gardner's idea of integrative and instrumental motivation running parallel, it's probably a good idea for learners to maybe adopt both of these orientations, possibly. And it was initially thought that they were really stable. So one student, a particular student, would be this particularly oriented, and they would always be that way. But in fact, orientations change, they intensify, and they weaken for many, many reasons. Dweck and Leggett, they also showed that learners with different orientations will demonstrate different task engagement within the classroom. And importantly for educators, a number of factors can lead to the orientations that students adopt. So it could be parental beliefs or the beliefs of the circle around them, previous learning experiences, also achievement history. But what this also means is that as educators, we can manipulate the motivations, the achievement orientations in the class towards orientations that are most appropriate for learning. Mastery orientations, these are intrapersonal. They're within self. It's the development of competence, it's understanding. In addition to this, there's an appreciation for the material that's being learned. Mastery orientations are related positively to intrinsic motivation. They reflect a deep level of information processing or deep level of strategy use when processing information. They're related to positive attitudes about learning, effortful study, and learners believe that effort is the path to success and that failure is the result of either inadequate strategy use or not enough effort. And what's important for us as the classroom and our classroom systems, that classroom-based mastery orientation. So in classrooms and school systems that adopt mastery orientations, these positively affect student-to-student relationships, and they positively affect student-to-teacher relations as well. But in contrast to these, performance orientations refers to the demonstration of competence. It's an interpersonal outperformance. So for example, wanting to get that high score, showing that you are better than somebody else. They might be a negative predictor of intrinsic motivation. They're likely related to superficial information processing, whereas mastery was deep level. This is superficial information processing. Studying the night before the test, for example. Performance-oriented learners might display negative attitudes toward learning, and frequently they believe that success is related to ability, so an innate talent, a born talent, as opposed to effort. And in contrast to mastery orientations, classroom-based performance orientations may be negatively or nullly affect student-student and student-teacher relations. Okay, so I've got so much more to do, but I'm a bit behind, so I'm going to skip over a lot of slides, and I'm going to give you a summary of mastery and performance, which we've just kind of talked about. So mastery, again, is intrapersonal development. It's related to intrinsic motivation and deep level processing of information. Learners have positive attitude to study. They make effortful study. They persist. And there are positive classroom relations. In contrast to that, performance orientations may be related to interpersonal demonstrations of competence, which might not be linked to intrinsic motivation, although there are differences of that. And information processing is superficial, and students adopt negative attitudes to studying, negative attitudes to learning, negative attitudes to making efforts, and possibly it could have negative effects on classroom relations. So now, if I haven't lost you, we've got about 20 minutes left. So I'd like to do a bit of moving from theory to practice. But before that, I just want to point out that Zoltan Dornier's book from 2001, Motivational Strategies in the Language Classroom, in that book, he provides a four-stage teaching practice in order to motivate students, beginning with creating the basic motivational conditions, generating initial motivation, maintaining and protecting motivation, and then encouraging students to self-evaluate and self-reflect. And for people who don't have a research budget, I found online a PDF of the textbook, which I will share with you in a few minutes. So what I'd like to do now, I'm sure I've talked a lot. What I'd like to do now is to go back to this initial document. And so if you don't have the document, I will share it again for those that came in late. So, and then we're going to skip down a bit. Here are the strategies that Zoltan Dornier has written about to create basic motivational conditions. It's for creating class norms, treating the students fairly, make sure the students treat each other fairly, and so forth. And one of them is promoting the development of group cohesiveness. So at the beginning of this tonight's presentation, I tried to put you into breakout rooms and I tried to get you to talk with each other. There wasn't enough time, there was too much to do, and I was a bit stressed. But the task, which is here, oh, and some have done it. The task which is here, this could be done online or in class using paper, and depending on the age of the students, there could be photos from students, or photos of their pet, or photos of their favorite place, or photos of their favorite thing, and there could be descriptions. So this group wall or class wall could be a way of creating group cohesiveness. So at the beginning of the group tonight, the beginning of the presentation tonight, you were in a small breakout room, but this could be done on a large scale in the classroom. Although with a document like Google Docs, it might be difficult for 20 or 40 people working on the doc at one time. That's why you were in breakout rooms, and that's why you were on different documents, because the Google Doc would fall apart. So the first thing we did tonight, which wasn't very successful, but imagine how we did tonight, and imagine what you would do in your own classroom. How could you adapt that idea to your classroom, where you create this group wall, you create a group wall of your information, your self-introduction, and your friends, your classmates' self-introduction, and it could be on the wall, it could be online somewhere in a closed system where everyone can see it, and that creates the idea of this group cohesiveness. Okay, so then so again, I said at the beginning of tonight, we tried to do that. There wasn't enough time. There was too much to do. But you can imagine how you could adapt that to your level of students, your level of classroom. Now I'd like to move on to the next set of strategies from Zoltan and Dornier, and these are generating initial motivation. And what I'd like to do is to highlight strategy 12, and this is to promote the students' awareness of the instrumental values associated with the knowledge of learning a second language. And down here, I have an activity, and we're going to do the activity right now. So the strategy is to promote instrumental values, to create this initial motivation within the students. So we're going to listen to a news report. It's 2 paragraphs of approximately 100 words in total. Listen once, so it takes about a minute to read. Listen just one time, and then listen again and type what you hear, or write if you want to write what you hear. And the text will be repeated a few times, and then we can maybe check with each other and answer some questions. So the first paragraph begins with the phrase Shiseido, which was, and the second paragraph begins with, in 2015, Shiseido. I just realized now that if you're all working on this one document, and if you're all typing, that won't work. So either copy the document or maybe write with a pen. And I apologize for that, for me being a slow learner. Now I'm going to stop the share, and I'll give you like 15, 20 seconds to prepare your document, get a document ready to type, or get a pen and paper to write. Okay, prepare a document for typing or a pen and paper for writing. And I'll give you 20 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to read one time, and just listen for understanding. Don't write, don't type. Shiseido, which was founded in 1872 in Ginza, Tokyo, will celebrate its 150th anniversary in 2022. In 2018, the company made English the official language at its Tokyo head office. Japanese employees now write internal documents and conduct meetings in English. According to President Masahiko Uotani, this is necessary because of its growing global business. In 2015, Shiseido organized its first global operations around regional offices located in major cities around the world. Because Japan serves as the company's global head office, it must support business activities in other locations. Uotani believes that making English the company's official language ensures better communication within the company. So that's the text. And that text, which we're going to practice a few more times, the idea is to promote instrumental values, understanding of instrumental reasons to learn English. Okay, so I'll read it again, and this time you can begin to write or you can begin to type, whichever is most convenient for you. Shiseido, which was founded in 1872 in Ginza, Tokyo, will celebrate its 150th anniversary in 2022. In 2018, the company made English the official language at its Tokyo head office. Japanese employees now write internal documents and conduct meetings in English. According to President Masahiko Uotani, this is necessary because of its global growing business. In 2015, Shiseido organized its global operations around regional offices located in major cities around the world. Because Japan serves as the company's global head office, it must support business activities in other locations. Uotani believes that making English the company's official language ensures better communication within the company. Okay, again, I see that we're very, very pressed for time, So Once students, after students write the text, which I have here, once students write the text and they can maybe compare with a partner after 2 listenings or 3 listenings, then students can answer questions. So comprehension questions and then discussion questions, and based on their level. Depending on your student's level, you can decide which questions are most appropriate. But the idea here is for students to think about that here is an important global business that's centered in Japan, and they're using English as its internal company language. So again, to promote the idea of English as an instrumental tool. And we did this tonight as a dictation, but you could imagine using this as a writing activity or a reading activity, and so on and so forth. Then moving on to the third part of Dornier's practice, this is maintaining and protecting motivation, maintaining the students' motivation and protecting their motivation. And there are many strategies to do that. One of them, which I'm just going to highlight, is strategy number 30, which is to increase the students' self-motivating capacity. So it's raising awareness within them that they can increase their ability to self-motivate. And what this would be here, you can see that in this activity that you would do in one class, students would think about a goal in which they were successful and then how they accomplished that goal. And then students would talk with a partner about this, and then tell with a new partner about this. And then in the end, the group, the class, could discuss what are important factors or what are useful ideas in order to develop motivation, develop this self-capacity to self-motivate. And this is a speaking activity, but you can imagine as a reading activity or as a writing activity and so on and so forth. And then one more. The last one, this is strategy 4, and this is to encourage, practice 4, and this is to encourage students to adopt positive self-evaluation behaviors. And strategy 31 is promoting effort attribution. So making students understand that effort is the key, effort's what's important. And there's a small activity here, which is right here, and it's a short story. It's a story about 2 young children who are learning to juggle, but you could change the word juggle to whatever it is that you want them to learn. And in one of them, the child is told from a parent that success at juggling is due to the idea that the family is born with juggling talents. Whereas the other child is told by their parent that their success is due to the effort that they are making. And then in the end, the one who was told that it's this innate ability quit juggling, and the child who was told that it's based on effort became a world famous and successful juggler. And you could have a class discussion about that and so on and so forth. Running really out of time, so I'm just going to highlight a few other things. Here's, if we want to ask your students about SMART goals, we saw this at a presentation a few years ago in Nagano from Louise Ohashi. So here's information about SMART goals. What's useful about this is that you might want to teach students about SMART goals and get them to write their own goals at the beginning of a course, and then midway through the course, have them evaluate the goals that they've written and maybe write new goals. And then at the end of the term, you could do this again. Here's some information about how to set goals. And here is how to develop the growth mindset goal. And you could have students kind of fill out this form. It could be written or not. But there's a PDF version of it right there with lots of pictures. Here are some links to lesson plans, worksheets, activities, and videos for all ages from elementary school to adults. These are primarily written for first language speakers of English, but they could be adapted for the second language classroom. This is a really great video here. It's short, it's about 3 minutes. It helps to teach in very simple English students that they can do it, they can be successful if they plan, if they make goals, if they make step-by-step goals, if they work hard. And then at the end, focus on mastery over performance in the classroom. As educators, we should emphasize improvement, emphasize progress, emphasize effort in learning, emphasize working hard, emphasize meeting challenges, facing challenges and meeting them, emphasize the process, so how students are learning, emphasize learning new things, the excitement of learning new things, emphasize the task, errors are okay, emphasize good relationships with each other, create this sense of belonging in the classroom and in the school, teamwork. Within the class, use expert learners. So within the class, all your students are at a different level and at a particular activity or for a particular assignment. Some students might have more information about that or more ability, more skill. Use them in your groups wisely, and also collaborative learning. And so that was a very, very brief, quick summary of some of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight. It's about 9:50. There might be some time for some comments or discussion or maybe Q&A. It's a great activity in the classroom. You would have students sitting at desks together and you control it, you read it once, students write, compare with their partners, group mates, read it again, and do that. But online it's a little more difficult because you have to go into the breakout room, come back from the breakout room, into the breakout room, come back from the breakout room. That's a little more challenging, but maybe if there was a recording, you could send the recording to the students, maybe they could work in the breakout room to do. Yeah, definitely a group activity. I think that's ideal for group. Yeah. Well, I think your learning context is different from mine because you're mostly in junior high school or high school, right? And so you're meeting also hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students probably each week. And so there are challenges to that. Ideally, as the expert, you're reviewing what students are writing to make sure that they're on the right path with the goals they've written. So a lot of students, when the first time they meet a task like this, they'll just say, oh, I want to get better, or I want to get 800 on the TOEIC test. But those are really, well, 800 TOEIC test is quite specific, but it may be too impossible for this particular learner, for example. But the really vague goals, like I want to get better, I want to improve, there's not enough there. How will they do it? What's the timeline for this improvement? How will it be measured? And so on and so forth. And maybe that goal is not important for that particular student. So ideally, after there's some kind of goal training, goal writing training, ideally there's a period where the expert, the educator is meeting with the students, maybe one-on-one, for example, to help the student reflect what they've written, and maybe give some guidance. And some students need it and some students don't need it. So, but I think that in a high school or high school context, I think it's a little more challenging there. So I think after there's a period of goal training, you could ask for some students to submit, and without showing names, you could maybe put the goals on the board and maybe on the whatever the PowerPoint or whatever, and maybe talk about why this is a really good goal. It meets these criteria, for example. But I think in your shoes where you have hundreds of students each week, you couldn't, there's no time. The school wouldn't allow you to meet one-on-one, and you didn't have enough time to read 200 or whatever it is goals each week, right? And discuss them as a group. Yeah, discuss maybe the better, well-written ones to give encouragement to others. I don't know particularly about that, but what, as part of my doctoral dissertation, I had several hundred students at different universities write goals 3 times during a year. And then at another university where I was working, I was teaching a class in individual differences in second language acquisition. So learning about goals and motivation was an important part of the course. And so what I had the students in that class do at that university, they looked at all these goals written by students at other universities, and they kind of grouped them together and thought about them and discussed them. And so that was me using these students to collect more data about those students. But what the students that were helping me sort of summarize or categorize the goals, as they were reading the goals, they were sometimes shocked to see that someone has this particular goal, or they were satisfied or surprised that they had that goal as well. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know particular research about this, but I can imagine it, you know, students going, oh, I didn't think about that before. Oh, that's just like me. And so it maybe depends on the situation. Of course, you wouldn't use names if you were doing something like that in the classroom.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you. Thank
yeah.
you. We're just about time, unless there's a last quickie question. Anybody?
Can I?
Yeah, most of my experience before coming to Nagano was working with students that were very, very busy, very, very busy. And at one of the universities that I worked at, sort of my main university, most of the students were first generation university students. So they had to work. They had to work to be a student, and they had no time for study. And they were English majors. And so it was the students who were able to identify clear goals who were the ones that were most successful. And so they became sort of models for the others. But it's baby steps. It is baby steps. I think SMART goals is a good way to start, you know, train the students to write very clear, very specific goals for a very short time, and let them see that if even the effort to whatever that is, it's learn 50 words this week, or learn 20 words this week, whatever it is, or learn 200 words this term, whatever the goal is for your particular, I don't know your level, for example, the students, but even if it's just a small thing like that, and have students work towards the 200 goals in the term, for example, help them to see that effort leads to achievement, effort leads to the success, right? And then that creates that motivation as well, right? It just, oh, I can do this, right? Oh, I can do this if I work hard enough. And unfortunately, not all students will have the time to do that, and not all students see the importance of that as well. And so, like the quote from Dr. Ford earlier tonight, right? You know, we can't push them. We can facilitate, we can provide ideas, we can encourage them to go this way, but we can't bring them all to this successful goal writing. So that's how I take it. I try my best with my students, and even in my very small class at the University of Nagano, I'm not successful with all the students, but they have their own goals, right? And that's work or whatever.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. That's all the time we have for tonight. Just before you leave, just some quick announcements. I noticed in our signups for this event, we had a few non-JALT members here. If you are interested in attending more events, please go to the jalt.org website. You can find the events calendar. You can see all of the events that are coming up soon. And as we are doing all of our events online, they are all free to attend. So I think there's a very, very good opportunity to learn more for any educators in Japan. If you are interested in sort of report on tonight's event, please check the Nagano JALT website. That's naganojalt.wordpress.com. And if you are not a member, please consider supporting this organization and becoming a member. The JALT is an NPO, and all of the work that we do is on a volunteer basis, and the organization is supported by the members and members alone. And finally, I will leave this Zoom session open if you'd like to stay and just chat. JP, do you have time to stick around? Yeah, okay. So JP will stay here if you'd like to ask him more questions about goals. If not, thank you very much tonight, and I will see check the chat website again. Thank you.